Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman and thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, in the wake of journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones' decision to reject a tenure offer from the University of North Carolina, we'll talk with local scholars about their experiences in higher education as Black women. A 9-year life expectancy gap between Black and non-Chicagoans. We'll discuss why that gap has grown to this point and how it can be narrowed. The renowned Chicago sculptor Richard Hunt and his years in the making new monument to crusading journalist Ida B. Wells in Bronzeville.
Equal the playing field for these businesses.
And the CEO of a local engineering firm gives the last word on what he thinks the city should do to help Chicago's small businesses. First off tonight, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones made her own headlines last week for rejecting the offer of a tenured teaching position at the University of North Carolina. Hannah-Jones was initially denied tenure for the position by the UNC Board of Trustees, even though tenure is customarily offered for such a job. Instead, Hannah-Jones announced she'll be joining the historically Black Howard University in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, her decision and her words resonated with many other Black women in academia who found themselves fighting to thrive in predominantly white institutions. Joining us now with more are Jane Rhodes, professor and head of the Black Studies Department at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and Valerie Johnson, associate professor of political science at DePaul University. Professors, thank you both for joining us. So let's start with this 8-page statement from Nikole Hannah-Jones that she released about her decision to decline this offer from UNC. It reads in part, quote, "It is not my job to heal this university, to force the reforms necessary to ensure the Board of Trustees reflects the actual population of the school and the state, or to ensure that the university leadership lives up to the promises it made to reckon with its legacy of racism and injustice." Jane Rhodes, let's start with you, please. Did her statement, and there was a lot more of it, but did what we've heard from her last week, did it resonate with you?
Absolutely. Nikole Hannah-Jones is articulating the challenge for all people of color in academia, but particularly for Black women. She decided that she had the opportunity to make another choice, and she took it. That she didn't have to be a token or to repair diversity and equity issues at UNC Chapel Hill, and that she was going to go someplace where she felt supported and welcomed and ready to do her job.
Yeah, the words that she used were celebrated and not tolerated. Valerie Johnson, how did it strike you?
Yes, actually, when I read the piece, I cried because it so much captured my experience working at a predominantly white institution at DePaul. To be honest, it is absolutely exhausting. And so while I have not taken the approach of Nikole Hannah-Jones and said, okay, it's not my fight, it's not my burden, I think many have, because we know that all systems have rewards and penalties associated with them. And so when you fight back, when you push back, you are penalized. You know, sometimes your career can be impeded. And so I understand very clearly how she said, well, you know what, it's not my burden to fix the university. And certainly she could not do it alone. It takes a village, so to speak, to change systems of white supremacy.
Valerie Johnson, sticking with you for a second, are there additional burdens that you feel Black women in higher education that you all have to take on?
Well, as the literature suggests on Black women, particularly in academia, it's almost like we become the mammies of the university. in that, students are sort of drawn to us because, particularly, students of color. And then, of course, we have to mentor white students as well. We take on a large proportion of the service burden. And, of course, as a twofer, you're often asked to be on committees as a woman, as well as an African American. And then it's pretty lonely. We know that only 2.1% of the nation's tenured faculty are Black women. If a university gets 6%, that is heralded as astonishing. And so there are just a number of challenges, from climate to, microaggressions, macroaggressions that we face daily.
Jane Rhodes, Valerie Johnson just mentioned that, you're often asked to serve on boards or committees because you're a woman, as well as because you're a Black woman. Do you feel that gender also plays into the dynamic that you experience in academia?
Absolutely. There are all of these ideas and tropes about Black women that really constrain and control how people see us and how we are expected to behave. We're navigating the angry Black woman image. We're navigating the idea that Black women are not intellectually competent. We're sort of constantly navigating that. And, gender in business, in the military, in politics, in academia, plays a significant role. There's an expectation that women are supposed to perform sort of feminine roles, as Valerie suggested, as a mentor, as a nurturer, as a caretaker. But then we're also held to these other standards in our institutions. So it's very much a double-edged sword.
What do you feel like you've seen improve over the course of your career? Jane Rhodes, back to you on that one.
Yeah, I've been a college professor for over 30 years. And so one thing that has changed are the numbers. As Valerie notes, we're still vastly underrepresented in academia. But in my first job, I was the only Black woman on the entire campus among the faculty. And that's now become more of a rarity. I've seen generations of young Black women, both in undergraduate and graduate school, move on to become professors. And so the exciting thing is that there's this very dynamic generation of folks who are determined to have a mark and have a place in academia. So that's a positive change, but it's been slow, it's been incremental, and it's still not nearly enough.
And Valerie Johnson, why aren't there more? What do institutions of higher ed need to be doing to attract more Black women into academia?
Well, they have to be committed. The commitment has to go beyond just a professed commitment. After the George Floyd murder, institutions of higher education, predominantly white institutions in particular, had, they upped their purported commitment, right? But, if you want diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to fund it, right? And so you have to have a commitment. And unfortunately, I've seen, even though there has been progress, yes, we went from 0% to 2.1% as, African-American females, at least, as tenured professors. But I really do question the actual commitment.
So progress, but more work to be done, it sounds like. Jane Rhodes and
Absolutely.
Valerie Johnson, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, details on Chicago's widening life expectancy gap in a conversation recorded earlier. The life expectancy gap between Black and non-Black Chicagoans has widened. That's according to a recent report from the Health Equity Index Committee at the Chicago Department of Public Health. Between 2012 and 2017, The gap grew from 8.3 years to 9.2. And that was before the coronavirus pandemic, which had a disparate impact on Black Chicagoans. Joining us to talk about the causes of the gap and what can be done about it are Ya Simpson and Blair Akins, epidemiologists at the Chicago Department of Public Health and members of the department's Health Equity Index Committee. Blair and Ya, thanks to you both for joining us. So we know that the report found that Black Chicagoans on average live to 71.4 years, while non-Black Chicagoans live to, on average, 80.6 years. Blair, what do these numbers tell you about health inequities in Chicago?
Yes, these numbers show us that there are a great health inequities and disparities in Chicago when we're looking at the lives of Black Chicagoans compared to non-Black Chicagoans. And so this 9.2 year gap is really, we identify some of the top drivers of that gap in our report. Those being chronic disease, HIV and other infectious diseases such as COVID, opioid overdose, infant mortality, and homicides.
And hopefully we can get into those a little bit deeper as well. The Health Equity Index Committee, team of 5 Black women, we're talking to 2 of them right now. Ya, what precipitated this research and why did you want to focus on life expectancy?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for having us, Brandis. What precipitated this gathering, if you will, this coming, was because at the health department, we wanted to amplify our voices as Black women. We felt that some of the leadership wasn't reflective of what we wanted to see. So by coming together and making this group work with Health Equity Index Committee, we wanted to deal with the voices and the unique perspective of the Black plight, specifically in healthcare. And so what we wanted to do was provide a voice for us. And the vehicle for doing that is be the change you want to see. So we decided we're going to change some things. And that is to have the first data book ever to be referenced for Blacks to non-Black. That has never happened in 200 years of the health department. And more specifically, to have a research team that was all Black women. That has never happened in 200 years of the health department. So that is what has happened is we brought this together. And the reason we're using life expectancy is because when you have health equity as an index, we don't have a specific measurement. So you have to find a proxy. And life expectancy is the one variable that around the world can be used to compare what we call your quality of life. No matter if you're from New Zealand to Ghana to South Africa, every health department in the United States uses life expectancy to gauge the quality of your life. So if we can do that around the world, obviously we should be doing that in Chicago. And we have now been able to get the unfortunately pre-COVID data for life expectancy, as you stated earlier when you first came on.
Well, and Ya, in the report, your team says the information is especially relevant now. You write, quote, underfunded community hospitals and clinics, lower wage jobs that do not allow teleworking, unstable or crowded housing, limited grocery store access, and lack of technology for students are causing Blacks and Black communities to be adversely impacted by this deadly virus. Blair, this report is based on data, as Ya just mentioned. This is from before the pandemic. Would you expect that COVID-19 has only widened this life expectancy gap?
Yeah, so we know from the COVID data that Black Chicagoans have been more disproportionately affected by COVID and COVID mortality compared to non-Black Chicagoans. And that's for a variety of reasons. Some of that being like the chronic diseases that Black Chicagoans tend to have more of compared to other race ethnicity groups. So yes, we would think that the gap has potentially even widened after the effects of COVID-19.
The report,
and Brandis, I'd like to add one thing to that. Not only has it widened in Chicago, it actually has widened from the national perspective. The gap for Blacks in the national from CDC, they just released their report out for 2020, life expectancy is over 6.5 years. The difference. So no matter if we're national or if we're local, Blacks are not living, or their life expectancy is worse as compared to others.
So as you all have just mentioned a couple of times, the report identified 5 main drivers of the disparity in life expectancy. They include chronic diseases, homicide, infant mortality, HIV, flu and other infections, and opioid overdose. Blair, back to you. What disparities stood out to you in your research?
I think really all of them. And one that has one of the largest effects is chronic diseases. And there's so many things that play into potentially why the chronic diseases are higher among Black Chicagoans as compared to the rest of Chicagoans. That could be access to healthy fruits and vegetables, safe communities, resources, access to doctors. All those things really play a wide range into why we're seeing all of these disparities across the board.
And yeah, we all know that last week the mayor and CDPH declared racism as a public health crisis. Why is it important to name it this way?
Absolutely. You can't fix what you can't name, and if you don't name it, you can't start to work on it. We have to look at not just naming it, though, and I am so grateful that this mayor was able to do that, and we're calling it a public health crisis because your health is at risk. As we said, this is about the improvement, the health equity of your health and your life and living. So we know that we have to talk about callings to action so we can get those racism and attack it head on. And let me be clear, let's define that racism a little bit. It is the power that people have unjustly distributed the opportunities and resources to cultural others and not to Blacks just because of their skin color. We want to dismantle that, and we're going to address it through health and health equity. So this is some of the reasons that we're calling racism as a public health crisis.
And Blair, I'm going to give you the last word. What can be done? I know this is a big question and not a lot of time. What can be done to address the disparities and close this gap?
Yeah, we specifically lay out some calls to actions in the report. One being acknowledge racism, both individual and systematic racism. Also demanding for an increase in funding so that these Black communities can have better resources to better improve their health. Also just acknowledging the issue and the disparity, and that's what we did here. That's something that not many other health departments do, even provide life expectancy data by race. So that's what we're doing here. And it's really just about all Chicagoans coming together to make a change. It's not just Black Chicagoans, it's everyone coming together because we really have to all work together to really close this gap.
Work for everybody to get in on. Blair Akins and Yas Simpson, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
There's more Chicago Tonight Black Voices just ahead, so stick around. When planning a new monument for the city, why not hire a local artist whose reputation is monumental? Sculptor Richard Hunt was born in Englewood in 1935. His works have been exported around the world from his studio here in Chicago. Producer Mark Vitale caught up with him before the unveiling of a monument in Bronzeville that was years in the making.
50 years ago, this one-time electrical substation near DePaul was converted into a sculptor's laboratory. Richard Hunt has been grinding, welding, and creating here since 1971.
When I got this place in the beginning, they had taken out all of the equipment except the crane, which of course I'm glad they didn't take it out. So here you have this big high ceiling, open space, to develop things in and move them around with the crane and get them out the back door.
His process is intuitive.
The way things work, I'll start, putting some things together that I have an idea about that'll suggest something.
Some of his 21st century works are currently on the terrace of the modern wing of the Art Institute. Richard Hunt graduated from the School of the Art Institute in 1957 with a degree in art education. But
one year, as I was working on my income tax, I said, I made more money selling sculpture than I did from my teaching job. And so I decided I'd quit teaching and just be a sculptor.
He has called his creations a dialogue between himself, the technique, and the material.
It's dynamic and it's three-dimensional. That is to say, you're going to have a painting of something on the wall. There's something that you look at that doesn't change. But if you have a sculpture, somewhere. You look at it from here, you look at it from there, or you look at it from another side, and it reveals itself in different ways.
He works with steel, bronze, copper, brass, and all kinds of scrap. Early in his career, he focused on found materials. In the 1960s, Studs Terkel asked him about it.
Mr. Hunt, as we're looking at your various works, these two statues, these two works of sculpture in front of us, what's the material? How did this come to be? What is the steel?
Yes, well, the raw material for these are automobile bumpers.
Richard Hunt's sculptures can be seen all over the city, from the Woodson Regional Library to Midway Airport to the Loop. His newest work in Chicago is Light of Truth, a monument in bronze to Ida B. Wells, the crusading journalist. A local author who is Ida B. Wells' great-granddaughter spent 13 years to bring to life this unconventional civic memorial.
We made a decision before we even contacted Richard that we wanted to have something that would not be in her likeness. We wanted it to be a monument versus a statue because Ida's life and her work was so multidimensional, so multi-layered that we felt trying to capture one pose would not necessarily capture all of who she was. The Ida B. Wells homes were right here on this land from 1941 to 2002. A tribute needed to be given to Ida on the land where the homes once stood, which is also really close to the house that she physically lived in. And this is Bronzeville. This neighborhood has a strong, rich history.
I'm reminded of the past and then looking toward the future of this community.
In the studio he's run for half a century, 85-year-old Richard Hunt is back to the grind.
It's interesting how the cityscape has changed, and of course I'm happy that I've had an opportunity to put a piece here and a piece there. It's been an important thing for me on many levels.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
Again, the monument to Ida B. Wells is called Light of Truth. Richard Hunt's work in the modern wing is up until September 20th. And be sure to watch our Chicago Stories documentary on Ida B. Wells and explore the companion website at WTTW.com/Ida B. Wells. The City of Chicago's Minority and Women-Owned Business Certification Program was designed to allow businesses that are often discriminated against to compete against long-established companies. But Ardmore Roderick's president and CEO, RASHOD Johnson, says that discrimination doesn't end once a business begins experiencing success. Tonight, Johnson gives us the last word on what he says the city can do to help build equity for small business owners.
My name is RASHOD Johnson. I'm the president and CEO of Ardmore Roderick. We are one of the city's leading infrastructure engineering firms. In the city of Chicago, minority and women-owned certified firms have caps. They have caps on their gross revenue. They have caps on their personal net worth. These caps are created with the assumption that as you grow and you grow out of this program and they're no longer discriminated against and do not need these certifications anymore. I would assert that that's when the discrimination really starts to happen. Most businesses are generational. They've been in business in the city of Chicago for 30, 40, 50, 70 years. However, the vast majority of minority-owned businesses have all been started within the last 20 to 25 years in an era where we didn't have opportunities until just recently. Typically in our industry, minority and women-owned firms are brought in to fill a very small portion of the project. So much so that it almost limits the capacity of these firms to really be able to grow. What we're doing as Ardmore Roderick is we've already started a minority mentor protege program where we are bringing in smaller minority and women-owned firms to help to grow them to scale. We're still African Americans, we're still minorities, we're still women-owned businesses, and that will never go away. And yet, all of a sudden, the city is looking at us like we're not. And that advantage being taken away at a critical point in growth, I think should be changed. I think the city should consider getting rid of the caps on minority and women-owned businesses so that we can compete against these 50 and 60-year-old firms for the same and similar projects with an opportunity to really compete at a level that would afford us success. Now is the time. We have an African American mayor. We have 32 out of 50 votes that are African American or Latino. And these are the people who have a vested interest to making sure that we have wealth equity in this city. And now's the time to do it.
And you can watch more in our Last Word series on our website. And that's our show for this Sunday night. Please be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, where you can also find our 2021 Summer Festival Guide. And join Paris Schutz and me tomorrow at 7 on Chicago Tonight. The new child tax credit starts next week, what parents need to know about those monthly payments. And a traditional instrument adds South American rhythms to a modern jazz combo. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named on the 2021 Expertise list of the best personal injury attorneys in Chicago.